understandably so. What really should people really know? What are the basics to know basically about?
Okay, as we said, talking about the mode of transmission, we've talked about body fluids, which has to do with the urine, the blood, the sweat, saliva, and perhaps if the person has really become very sick and is vomiting. So all of those kind of body fluid, we should avoid them, especially if you see somebody that is very sick. Be careful to touch such person. Instead, there has been, a number of telephone numbers that we can call. And then the symptoms will start. We've talked about fever. It is not just fever. It has to be a fever, for instance, that somebody has treated and is unresolved.
Okay.
It is persistent.
Persistent fever.
Headache, and in the late stages you have bleeding. And the bleeding does not necessarily have to be like you're seeing the blood. Like the eyes can be very, like bloodshot.
Okay.
Like you can see patches of blood on the person's body. So we want to look out for such things. And if you see this, report to the nearest hospital or call the numbers.
Okay, talking about those numbers, which will, of course, be showing up on our screens in just a few minutes. If you do notice that someone has persistent fever and all of the symptoms that you have mentioned at home, you call the numbers. What's Lagos State Ministry of Health to do? Will they come pick up the person?
Yes,
okay.
Yes, because these teams have been divided. Those that would monitor, like all of those people that have contacted Mr. Sawyer, and those that will go all out to look for the people that call, that say, okay, I suspect that this person may have this disease, and then the Lagos State Ministry of Health and its partners will move in.
And those are the numbers that you have on the screen.
Yes.
I'll just read out the first one, though, 080-231-69485. Those are the Ebola control numbers. They're all listed on your screen. To do well to note those numbers.
To note them down and just save them.
Yes, and of course, the key point here is if you do notice someone with these symptoms, don't treat them yourself.
Yes, we shouldn't go paranoid, though.
Exactly. Though.
That, okay, I don't want to shake Amara because I could contact it.
Thank you so much, Yomi.
Thank you.
Our health correspondent, Yomi Otagbe, here in the Channels Television. Now, we move on to South Sudan now, where after 8 months of conflicts, the country already appears ready to resume peace negotiations with the rebel faction of the SPLM under the leadership of the former Vice President Riek Machar, downplaying the likely implications of recent military engagements in Upper Nile and Jonglei states. This shouldn't come as a surprise, in the least, as the world's newest nation is facing the worst food crisis in the world. In addition to that, HIV/AIDS victims have not been able to continue their treatment based on the current situation.
Thousands of displaced people living with HIV in South Sudan are struggling to continue their HIV treatment because they cannot access medication. Abraham Deng came to Juba, South Sudan's capital, after the local hospital in the north was burned down, and Deng is HIV positive. He says he had no access to healthcare at home after the conflict in the troubled East African country began in December last year.
The health workers are not there, so everybody is running. So no medicine, no treatment.
Deng receives his medication from the Juba Teaching Hospital. With the ongoing fighting, the Juba Teaching Hospital is treating many more people living with HIV. A recent UNAIDS report has found that emergencies can disrupt care and treatment for people already living with HIV. The forcible displacement of people through conflict or disaster is associated with increased food insecurity, the destruction of livelihoods, and resulting poverty. There are concerns many displaced people living with HIV have had to stop treatment.
Many people living with HIV who were healthy now face a desperate future. We must act urgently to ensure they receive treatment.
At least 10,000 people have been killed and more than 1 million displaced in the 8-month-long conflict. For 30,000 people in the UN House camp near South Sudan's capital, Juba, it's a safe haven from the violence. Here, Both Peter Machak distributes condoms and talks to young men about HIV and AIDS.
They can easily deceive women and they give them money to have sex with them.
Aid agencies also say sexual violence, particularly against women, is also a major concern. The UN has also accused both government and the rebel forces in South Sudan of committing crimes against humanity, including murder, rape, and other types of sexual violence.
The woman was raped, especially when they're going to town to buy their goods for their business.
South Sudan is also facing a potential famine that could affect millions of people. According to the United Nations, 50,000 children face death this year because of hunger and malnutrition.
We have to address what is becoming a nutritional catastrophe, and it is now a nutritional disaster for so many children. We need to, and that means addressing it when they are in a severe state, but it also means, which UNICEF works on, but it also means working on it in a slightly earlier stage while it is still moderate.
Political turmoil and conflict threaten to plunge the country back into the same cycle of war and human misery that plagued its people when it was still part of Sudan and rebels were fighting the northern government in Khartoum.
And that's where we end the world today. Thanks for watching. I am Amarachi Ubani. Sports News is up next.